Talking Crop, the new Goodyear Farm Tires podcast for the farmers, by the farmers. I'm Will Evans and I'm proud to be partnering with Goodyear Farm Tires to present the new Talking Crop podcast. My name's Will Evans. I am a farmer from North Wales near Wrexham. My family are been in farming forever. We're at least 10th generation farmers as far back as we can trace. We're a mixed farm. We farm cattle and arable crops. Heavy focus on looking after the soil, on trying to farm with the environment, not against it. We farm by a river, so we have lots of fun with flooding, which is becoming more of a problem and something that we're going to have to deal with increasingly. And I also a part of a very much a family business, so I farm in partnership with my parents, live on the farm with my wife and 4 young daughters.
Fantastic. Perfect. While we're on your story, we'll maybe just continue with that. So just tell us a little bit about your family background and the background to the farm here, and also how your involvement in farming started and developed.
Yeah, so my grandfather was the youngest of 10 children from a hill farm west of here. Wasn't much left for him up there, as you can imagine, as the youngest of 10. So him and my grandmother, fortunate to get the tenancy of this farm in 1950. They moved down here then to which was seen as a sort of much more prosperous kind of anglicised area of Wales, and they built a life for themselves. And 3 generations later, we're still here, just about clinging on to the farm. So it's been an interesting ride over the last few years. We've made a lot of changes to the farm. We used to be a dairy farm until 2008, but now we farm beef cattle and arable crops. We buy in all the calves from neighbouring dairy farms, take them right the way through to finishing.
Was there ever another option for farming, or was it always Will Evans destined to be a farmer?
I was destined to be a farmer. My dad is Mr. Farmer, so my dad has no other interests other than farming. He was trailing after his dad from about the age of 2 probably, and I was much the same. I don't think I ever even considered doing anything else, and I left school as soon as I could, which in hindsight now was probably a mistake, but it felt like the right thing to do at the time. And yeah, never thought about doing anything else. And although I've sort of fallen into a few bits of freelance journalism and things like that, almost by accident over the last few years, I've never really done anything else other than farming, and I probably never will. And
do you consider yourself to be fortunate to have had the life that you have as a farmer?
I consider myself to be hugely fortunate to be a farmer. Yeah, I mean, I had an amazing farm childhood. My sister and I had all the freedom and space that you probably only get growing up on a farm, and it was like something out of a Just William novel or something. We kind of had a very stereotypical childhood, I guess, in many ways, but it was very safe and secure, and we're always surrounded by lots of relatives, and there was always sort of people here coming and going, and I knew from a very young age that I wanted a similar childhood for my own children, and I think they've been incredibly well. I think they've been lucky to have it. You'd have to ask them whether they think me sort of getting them out of bed early in the morning to come and help me with things is a good thing. But I hope when they're older, they appreciate how fortunate they've been.
And just talk about your own children. And I know you've got four girls, and how does that dynamic work on the farm in terms of embedding them into the farming family and trying to keep the 10 generations going to 11, 12 and beyond?
Yeah, the girls, I'd never push them to do it. It's not an easy life. I mean, it's wonderful in many ways. It's an amazing community to be part of, and I love it, and I love hearing about other farmers and their stories, and I suppose which is why I'm so excited about this podcast. But you've got to be sure you want to do it, and you've got to love it. If you don't love it, it can eat you up and chew you out, really. So I wouldn't push them to do it. They've got to be 100% sure. I would encourage them to go and maybe do something else for a bit first before they come back to the farm. But we'll see. I'm not too worried either way, really. If they want to do it, I'd be delighted. But if they don't, as long as they're happy, that's okay, and I can retire and put my feet up.
Fantastic. And in terms of how you see, you've obviously said there's been a lot of changes in the last 10 to 12 years. How do you see this farm evolving over the next 10 to 12 years? Where do you see that heading to?
I think the farms, we've seen massive changes in the time that I've been farming. So I'm 46. I've been farming, I guess, frighteningly for about 30 years. When I first started farming in the mid 90s, there was never any talk about the environment. It just wasn't mentioned. It was all about production and yield and push. But clearly, the big challenge for us all as farmers and as countries really, and governments and policymakers, is how we maximise food production, but do it in a way that also not only helps protect the environment but enhances the environment. And I think we've made some really positive steps in that direction. We've certainly done a lot on this farm to try to improve the environment. We've spent a lot of time planting new hedges, and we've sort of fenced off areas for habitat and all those kind of things and we're not getting paid to do. We do it because we think it's the right thing to do and we like doing it. And I think the big challenge of our age as farmers is how we do that in a responsible way. And I think we're getting there. I don't think we always get it right, but actually, as an industry and a community, I'm pretty proud of the work we're doing in that regard.
And just talk to us a bit about your media career and how that started and took off, and tell us a bit about Rock and Roll Farming Podcast and what the spin-offs of that have been.
Yeah, so I started telling the farm story, if you like, our farm story on social media several years ago. By accident, really, just posted a few pictures of tractors and nerdy stuff like that, and I was amazed by the reaction it got. And people seemed to really like it, and they wanted to hear more about it. And I suppose even if as all families, if you go back far enough, are connected to the land somehow, aren't they? And we've kind of maybe further disconnected from the land in this country because of the Industrial Revolution and everything else. But if you go back far enough, everybody's interested in the country. You know, we've got this amazing countryside in the UK. Everybody loves it. And lockdown was a real reminder, I think, for people when they couldn't get access to the countryside. It was a real thing, wasn't it? People craved those open spaces and patchwork countryside that we've got. And I started telling that story and providing that. I was amazed by the response it got and how interested people were. Then I started writing an extremely mediocre blog about the farm, and even that got quite a good response. I read some of them not long ago and they were absolutely dreadful. But on the back of that, I got asked to do a bit of writing for in the Farming Press and things like that. Started writing for Farmers Weekly, which was tremendously exciting. If you'd ever told me that when I was younger, I'd be writing for Farmers Weekly, I wouldn't have believed you. And now I write a weekly column in that, which I love doing. The connections you get from that are amazing. And then, in the early days of podcasts, I just thought, wouldn't it be great if someone was talking to farmers and hearing those human interest stories and putting it out there, and nobody seemed to be doing it. And I thought, well, I'll do that then. And figured out how to do a podcast and sort of had to explain to everybody what a podcast was in those days. And started putting out those interviews and just spoke to so many remarkable people, and it just went nuts, really. The people listening from all around the world. And I was amazed by the response it got. And it just shows that there is an appetite out there to hear from farming stories in this amazingly diverse community that we're all part of.
Which brings us on to talking crop. So just obviously talking crop for Goodyear Farm Tires. Just first of all, tell us how excited you are to be heading around the country and talking to different farmers and presenting the Talking Crop podcast.
I'm so excited to be presenting the Talking Crop podcast. Like some of the people we've got lined up, some of the stories are so cool. I mean, it's all around the country. I already mentioned the sort of diversity of the industry, but it's diversity of people, diversity of business, diversity of the countryside. It really is exciting. I can't wait to hear their stories about how they've got to. We've got sort of first generation farmers and multiple generation farmers, people who've got multiple generations involved in the business. There's always a dynamic about how it all works. People have got really, really interesting diversifications to their business. Everybody's doing different things. Can't wait to hear more about it and bring those stories to a wider audience.
Fantastic. And I guess the timing is perfect because it has been a tough time for farmers, particularly the last 12 months. So I guess highlighting that farming family story at this time is probably more important than ever before.
Yes, it is really important to highlight those stories more than ever. I mean, farming and food production is on the front pages of newspapers at the moment for various reasons. Really, really important to put those stories out there so people realise that farming, as wonderful a life as it can be, it does have its challenges. It is facing difficulties. I think the whole industry is at a bit of a crossroads at the moment. I think we are losing a lot of farmers. A lot of farmers are leaving the industry. I think that doesn't bode well for the future of the country, let alone the countryside and our rural communities. And I think it's really, really important that we put the stories out there and that people see the good work that farmers are doing and how central they are to their community. You know, family farms really are the backbone of rural Britain.
Obviously, the podcast is being pulled together by Goodyear Farm Tires, Will. And obviously, you've got some machinery with Goodyear Farm Tires on here and a bit of a history with the brand.
We have, yeah. We've got a massive Ferguson 65 Mark II. I very much enjoy using. Don't use it as often as I probably would like to, but it does surprise in what jobs it still gets used for. And we've also got a couple of the newer tractors that have got Goodyear tyres on too.